Hello, everybody. This is Laura Hildebrandt with the UN SDG Action Campaign. I'm here with a couple of my colleagues, with Diane and Nguyen, to introduce the My World survey tool to you as SDG advocates. Before we get started, I'd like to show you a little video which will give you an introduction to what this is all about. Very brief video. Diane, can you link us to the video, please?
I want this to be the most inclusive global development process the world has ever known. Development, after all, is about people. People must be in the driver's seat. Their aspirations and ambitions must shape our policies and goals. The United Nations has engaged hundreds of thousands of people in consultations around the world, a historic effort for a historic policymaking process.
Okay, so that brief video is just to give you a little introduction to what this is all about and to remind us that it's about people. It's about keeping the voices of people at the heart of what we're doing. So I'm going to take you through a little introduction to what we're going to cover today in the webinar. One is to give you some background about this whole process and then how the My World survey tool came about. Then we're going to look at how to use the tool, some of the impacts that it's had, and then some of the toolkits that we have, and then to give you some specific instructions for how to get going on using the tool, both in an online and an offline context. So we'll go to the presentation now, please, Diane. And we're going to, very importantly, at the end, we're going to open up for questions. And we want to hear from you because this is our chance to have a conversation about how to use the tool. By the end of this webinar, we'd like you to be prepared to get started with implementing My World. So please think about, put yourself in the perspective of being ready to launch this survey tool. What do you need to know? And we hope to answer some of those questions by the end of this webinar. This is the outline, as I said, a little background on the SDG process, an introduction to the survey tool. And then a little discussion about why we should bother with this survey. Why does it matter? I'll tell you about the toolkits and then how to take part both in an online and offline. And then we'll open up to questions. So just to give you a little background, we, as you know, we're the UN SDG Action Campaign. We were formerly called the UN Millennium Campaign. And at this time, we were helping to build awareness around the MDGs. Probably most of you are somewhat familiar already with the process that was undertaken, but some of you have come quite fresh to the SDGs. So where did these SDGs come from? At the turn of the millennium, the governments decided that they wanted to do something very impactful for the world, that we'd reached a level in human development that we needed to make the world a better place. And they set forth these very ambitious targets at the turn of the millennium, called the Millennium Development Goals, for the 15 years after the millennium to achieve these great targets. I think you're probably familiar with that process, but as we came to the end of those years, we started to assess where we're at, but also to think about what comes next, because we saw that it worked. We saw that the setting of goals at a global level was quite an effective way to hold governments to account and hold everybody to account to how we can have an impact on development. And so, starting in 2013, a global consultation process was undertaken. It was led by the UN, but also member states who sponsored consultations with every sector of society within their countries. There were consultations held at a national level, also at an international level around thematic topics. this whole process took about 2.5 years of consultation and then also negotiation between the member states to talk about the goals that would come out at the end to frame the SDGs. Now, as a part of that process, we as a campaign who have the mandate to communicate with the general public, we took on a very important piece of it, which was called My World. This was a super simple survey to engage the general public in this debate. Most people aren't talking about the Global Development Agenda in their daily lives. So we designed a survey to come to them with the issues and try to understand their perspectives and why they should get involved. So we launched the survey, the My World, what we now call My World 2015 survey, with one question asking them to tell us which of 16 different areas were of immediate concern to them and their families. As that process unrolled over the 2.5 years that we were sharing that survey, we got nearly 10 million responses from around the world. We had over 190 countries participate. And what's quite interesting for all of you, I think, is how we did it. How did we capture nearly 10 million voices from around the world to define this effort? We engaged partners of all sizes, from national governments down to individuals who could help us to share the survey around the world. And what's surprising to many people, because many people encountered it through the online platform, is that over 80% of the ballots that were cast in the original My World survey took place offline. That meant a human one-to-one interaction of people going and talking to other people about this development agenda that was happening. Therefore, it shows you that this survey is important in two levels. We're capturing the voices of people, what they think, and feeding it back into the development process. But we're also telling people, it's an awareness tool as well, telling people that this process is happening and that they have a stake in the process. So the My World 2015 project, as I'm saying, brought in all these results from around the world. And then what did we do with them? Those results were then fed into these negotiations to define the goals. And we know from our conversations with colleagues in the member states who were part of that process that these people's voices were actually helped to influence which goals became part of the SDGs. In particular, we know that goal 16, the goal on governance, which a lot of governments were not very interested in having included in the SDGs, was in part influenced because it was among the top 4 priorities, and over 4 million people said that it was a top priority for this development agenda. So the My World survey was a big part of that. Actually, so that was an impact that I just described that happened at the global level with the My World 2015 tool. Once the SDGs were launched, we've redesigned the My World survey. I think many of you have seen it. I think these are a bit out of, yeah, maybe we should, I'm going to go back to the impact stories later. I'm just going to jump ahead because the My World 2030 survey was launched after the SDGs were adopted. So 2015 happened, we had fed into the process using the My World survey tool, and following all this great support that we had for the tool, we decided that it was a very useful tool for continuing with engaging the public around the SDGs. So we designed a new tool, My World 2030, which has 3 questions. But we also have this special arrangement with the ASEAN Secretariat because they're very interested in engaging the public in the ASEAN community vision. And so we came up with a custom version of the survey tool to engage people around the SDGs and the ASEAN community vision. This custom survey was launched last September at the General Assembly. You can see a picture of it here with the UNDP administrator and foreign affairs ministers from the ASEAN member countries. The survey has been translated into all the ASEAN languages, and was officially launched at that time. But so far, as many of you probably know already, we don't have a lot of responses to it. And that's very much part of your role as advocates, is helping us to get this survey out. So introducing you to the survey, then, we now have 4 questions in this version of the My World survey, the custom ASEAN version. Number 1 question is, are you aware of the ASEAN community vision? The number 2 question is, are you aware of the Sustainable Development Goals? And then number 3 is very similar to our original My World survey, is, which of the following goals are of immediate concern to you and your family? And then you select 6. And after you select 6, you're asked to then determine if you think the situation has improved or worsened on the goals. Now I'm going to jump back here. Why should we get involved in sharing the survey? Why does it matter? What kind of impact can it have? I mean, it seems like a lot of effort to go out and talk to people. Well, I already mentioned the first impact is on awareness. And here, I think I'll give you the example of what we've been doing with Moroccan youth using the My World survey. There are a handful of, I think, 3 people from civil society in Morocco who attended the Global Festival of Action here in Bonn in 2017. There, they learned about the My World survey, and they saw that if you're an individual trying to raise awareness or trying to get some action happening around development issues, sometimes it's very helpful if you can attach yourself to something bigger than yourself, because otherwise people say, well, why should I listen to you? And what do you stand for? What do you represent? And these youth from Morocco saw the power of using the My World tool in this regard. They started taking the My World survey to youth around Morocco in order to capture the voices of Moroccans and then empower themselves as a civil society organization using that data. How does that work? What do I mean by that? Well, they collected over 17,000 responses to the survey. And now that they have those responses, they can go and present, they do go and present themselves to government agencies and tell them that they're not just representing themselves, they're now representing the voices of these 17,000 people. And the 17,000 people care about education and they care about health. And so you can see how this survey, when they use it at a national level like that, can help to open doors. It opens doors because these youth now represent an initiative that's tied to the United Nations, and they also represent those people that they've collected data from. They represent their voices. So the survey can be used as a very powerful tool to raise the visibility of your own efforts and then also to raise your credibility. And you can see some of the results here. They collected over 17,000 responses. They've mobilized hundreds of citizens and volunteers, and they have held a number of meetings around the country as well, with hundreds of people at each of them. And I think at this point, they actually have the king on board. I mean, they've received funding from the government for their efforts. It's truly an amazing success story. You can read more about this if you go to the My World survey page, which is about.myworld2030.org. And under that, you'll see a tab called Impact. And you can see some more about these impact stories that I'm sharing here with you today. Here's another example. I think the first one's more relevant to you because it's individual activists taking action. But here's an example of how a city can use the survey. Mexico City's Youth Institute, which is called INJUVE, found that the My World survey is a very effective way for them to engage citizen voices, specifically from youth. They organized a mass rollout of the survey using thousands of their youth volunteers to go out to become ambassadors for the survey and to go door to door to talk to people about their priorities. Their target audience was youth, so the majority of votes that were cast were under 30. And they came back, and the city now had the capacity to understand youth issues. In fact, in their case, they incorporated a couple additional questions. They made a custom version, just like we've done for the My World survey. for the ASEAN My World survey. They gathered 1.6 million voices in Mexico City and then used those voices to determine policy and programming that they would offer directly to youth in the city. They, for instance, in this case, found that health was a top concern among young people. And they thought this was a little bit unusual because usually young people are some of the healthiest in a society and it's not the primary concern to them. And when they explored this further through additional surveys and focus groups, they found that it was actually mental health that was a concern for young people in Mexico City. And so the city actually started to introduce mental health clinics around the city that were specifically targeting youth, that were more like community centers where youth could come and drop in and talk to a psychiatrist who's dressed in plain clothes and quite young like themselves. Anyway, that's another interesting story, which I could get into more detail about. But just to say that the survey results tell you what people are thinking, and you can use that as a tool to engage politically and in terms of determining some programming or policy results. And these results have been used at international level, at national level, city level, and by civil society to bolster their efforts. There are probably questions at this point, but I think I'm going to jump into specifically how we have some toolkits to serve you in sharing the survey. I think that's the general overview of what the survey is and why it matters. So here's a little bit about how it works.
There's a comment about asking you if you can speak a little slower.
Slower, okay. Thanks, Diane. Sorry, everyone. I'm conscious of the time. I don't want to. I have so much to say about this topic because I'm very passionate about the My World survey. I'm sorry if you're having trouble keeping up, and maybe in some cases the connection's not terrific. So I'll slow down a little bit. So to talk you through how the survey works, in general, the partner registers with My World. You've all already been registered and you've all been given a partner ID for My World. Your partner ID specific respondents have responded. So if you want to go back to them or you're looking for a particular target group, you can see your responses under your partner ID and do some of your own analysis for your community. You can explore specific resources for the ASEAN My World survey tool here at about.myworld2030.org/ASEAN resources. In particular, of interest to you there, you will find all the ballots translated into all the ASEAN languages. And those ballots are PDFs, which you can download. And Nguyen, do you want to now talk about some of the toolkits that are available? Shall we do that? Mm-hmm. Is it one of the? It's one of the slides, is it?
Yes.
Oh, I shouldn't.
Hello everyone, with Lê here, and now I'm gonna walk you through some of the toolkits is available on our website regarding the My World survey. So, as you can see on the screen, firstly, this toolkit is also, we have the link in the guidebook, which we already sent you all. So if you click on the link, we have a list of toolkits with regarding My World survey. So I opened the first one is like My World, how to get started, and I will walk you through a little bit. As Laura already mentioned, like what is My World and why we need to do the My World survey and why it's important. So it's will it plan in the toolkit, as you can see, it's a global citizen survey. And important for us is to bring the voice of ASEAN region into the national, regional, and international level. So how the My World ASEAN works? So as Laura already mentioned, we have 4 questions in the My World survey. And the first one is like, do you know about the ASEAN My World Vision community? And the second is, are you aware of the SDG goal? And which 6 of the SDG goal are the most important to you and your family? And the fourth one is the situation of the goal you choose is getting better, stay the same, or got worse over the past year. And the challenge regarding the My World survey is like how to empower people. And in the toolkit, we already explained like the My World based on 3 cornerstones. Awareness, like to increase ownership SDG among citizens. As we may know, the SDG is like the people agenda. So it's not about top down from the government, but we need the survey because we need it from bottom up. We need to hear from individual, from citizen. Everybody need to get involved and to have their voice on the agenda, what is important to them. So the government can understand the perspective of people, especially for ASEAN region, because they all committed to launching the My World ASEAN. So that's really important. And the second one is accountability to empower citizens, especially like we know we want it like the people voice, so no one left behind. So as an advocate, you can reach other different targets, like you can work in university, you can talk with students, or you can talk with rural people in rural area, people with disability. So everyone need to be heard in this survey. And action, one of your tasks is collect at least 500 My World survey My World survey. So you need to use this survey to collect data. And as you already know the importance of this, this data will be used. You can analyze it, you can see the data visualization while you collected the data. So you compare between region in your country. So you can present it to your local mayor or your local government, so they know what is the people in the region thinking about and what they need to do to change the situation, what is important to you. So the second toolkit is also available on our website regarding the My World. Diane, can yeah. It's a My World campaign toolkit. So I'm just briefly walk you through because we're gonna have another session next Monday at 6 p.m. Bangkok time about how to do campaign for the My World. And based on this toolkit, we will explain you in detail like how to make a campaign about SDG, how to involve people, online and offline campaign. So it is available online. You feel free to click on that to have a better understanding before the webinar next week happen. And we will explain it later and talk you through the toolkit and answer all the questions if you may have. I think that all the toolkits will available right now. So Laura, would you hand over to Laura to explain about the online?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you very much. And just to open up again. 1 moment. Okay, so first, I'm sorry, they should say offline campaigns. I'll talk to you about a couple. Diane and I are going to talk to you about a couple of different ways to share the survey. We have some successes with people sharing it online. I'm sure many of you are super connected individuals, and you'll have some success sharing it with your online communities. I'm going to talk to you about the importance of also sharing it offline. What are some of the advantages of sharing the survey offline? First of all, there's this interpersonal connection that you have. You, as an advocate, will go and speak to people about the SDGs when you share the survey. You speak to them in person, you explain what the survey is, you explain what you're doing, and then you ask them the questions. This creates a very powerful awareness tool, and it gives you a chance to really understand their feedback. When you do the survey primarily online, of course, you don't get any of this. You just get the shares, and you can track who's responded, and you can see how they responded, but you don't have the same level of feedback for yourself as an advocate. So we'd like to encourage you to do a little bit of both. When you do the survey offline, there are a couple of ways that you can do it. And take the survey. Of course, that's technically doing it online, but that's doing it with somebody in person. You can go to the survey platform and ask them the questions. Now, another way to do it is using the paper ballot. As I mentioned, you have the paper ballots available in the ASEAN resources folder. You should find it in your language. And what you can do is take the PDF and print it out. Now, I'll tell you that the advantage of the paper is that you can collect many responses at once if you're in a room full of people. This might be, for instance, if you are invited to a school to speak, or you create an event where you can speak to high school children or university students about the SDGs. And there you could share, maybe collect 500 responses or 100 responses at once. Similarly, if you're going to a conference or that kind of thing, the paper ballot is fantastic for this because you actually get quite a high response rate when you put a piece of paper in front of people. And it means that you can collect many responses in 5 minutes. Of course, if you're going in and collecting responses live with the person, it takes much longer. You might have a 5-minute interaction to get one survey response. The disadvantage with the paper is that the information stays on the paper, and then we need to translate it into our online data platform. And so you will also find in the ASEAN resources folder an Excel table which needs to be filled in with all of the information from the paper ballots. So after, let's say you're at an event and you get 100 people respond, at the end of that event, you collect all the responses and you've got a stack of ballots on your desk. You can download this Excel table and you see how there's instructions for how to then read the information from the template and enter each response as one line of the Excel file. And then you can send the Excel file back to us. If you're going to do this, I expect there will be questions. You can send the questions to support or directly to your support team when you're entering the data. But basically, if you have a set of paper ballots, let us know, and then we can provide you with the support for how to get those into the system. I'll just say, you know, that really for a successful My World campaign, you kind of want both. You want to have both options at least, because the paper ballots are a bit of a hassle on the tail end because you then have to enter the information, but they really do have the advantage that you can collect a lot of responses at once and quite quickly. They also potentially, depending on the context, have the advantage that you can go and collect responses that you wouldn't otherwise get. You can give them to people that you see on the street, or you can also go into different kinds of communities with an offline ballot. Whereas if you're just sharing online, the type of person who's going to respond obviously has connection to the internet. They're already quite educated. So if you'd like to really organize a campaign that leaves no one behind, you should include and consider including an offline component where you and maybe a team of volunteers will go and ask the survey directly from people. So I think that's it for the offline campaign. For online campaigns, I'll turn it over to Diane. Are you prepared to come and explain just how the online campaign works?
Thank you, Laura. Hello, everyone. My name is Diane. I think I introduced myself last time when we met, but I'll introduce myself again. I'm the digital strategist of the campaign. And before I forget, click on the subscribe button below if you haven't done so already, and click on the notifications button as well. So next time when we go live, you will get a notification. And also a shout out to Nadine, who's connecting from UNDP Asia Pacific, who is a partner of this ASEAN My World project. So I will walk you through some of the elements of online using My World online and using your partner ID. And I'm going to switch to my browser so I can show you live how you can do this. And please use the comments section if you have any questions related to this. I'll try to answer. Okay, so I'm going to go into a new window and I'm going to simply type in the URL for ASEAN. And at the same time, I'm going to add my partner ID. I'm going to come up with a test partner ID here. I don't know if anyone already owns this ID, but I'm going to use ADV-NED-1 as the partner ID. So this could be your partner ID. Again, the URL goes as asean.myworld2030.org/partner/ADV-NED/1. The point is, after /partner, you can add your partner ID and the system will record it. And obviously, this is a very long URL. Now, if this URL is given to me, what I would do is I would shorten this URL. I would go to a URL shortener. I would Google for URL shortener. And maybe I'll use bit.ly. And I will paste this link and it gives me a short URL. So I will use this URL for my campaigns. I'm not going to ask people to type in a long URL, but if I do a Facebook campaign, and by the way, we are going to have a separate session on just campaigning, on how to do a campaign next Monday. So make sure you tune into that. I'm not going to talk a lot about how to do a campaign today, but when you're doing a campaign, use a URL like this. So it's short and you can use it in Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever you decide to use in your campaign. So I would imagine you would have a video or a picture, something like that. And it says, what are you passionate about or something to that extent. And click here to tell the ASEAN leaders about what matters to you the most, and there will be this link. So imagine someone clicks that link, they'll be taken, they'll be taken to the ASEAN survey. By the way, if you already know your partner ID, you can do this with me. You can try this with me. It's partner/your partner ID. See the URL here again. I'll slow down a little bit if you're trying to do this with me. The next step is, if you want to redirect people to a specific language. I don't speak any of these languages, unfortunately, but I'll select Indonesian. And all you need to do is, at the end of your URL, copy this URL. It adds lang equals ID. So all you need to do is simply add that, and it will take the user directly to that particular language. So remember, your partner ID is in the URL. At the same time, there's this additional bunch of characters which tells the system it needs to take the user to Chinese in this example. So if you need to direct a user directly to their own language, this is the way to do so. I'm going to switch back to English. And then I'm going to take the My World survey really quickly. And I'm going to say yes to both of these and select, I'm randomly selecting some goals here. And I'm going to complete the third question, which is asking about the situation of the goals. Okay, it is asking me for some questions. I will have to reveal my age to all of you here. And then as the country, it has a bunch of countries, but I'm going to select Thailand in this case, just so it's from one of the ASEAN countries. Okay, I lost it. Okay, where is Thailand? Okay, I found Thailand. And for city, I'm going to just type B, and you can see a list of cities pop up, and I'm going to select Bangkok, Thailand. And for disability, I'm going to say, well, just for this case, I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to type a disability, say hearing, and submit this vote. Yes, so I was taken to the thank you page with a few things I can do. I can subscribe to our newsletter, or I can share what I did on social media. Now, how do we track this? How do we track a user has taken the My World survey using your partner ID? So the easiest way to track is go into the all these URLs are in the toolkit, so don't worry about it if you can't really follow me here. But it's ASEAN-data.myworld2030.org. It's taking me to a nice report. And here I can filter by the partner ID I just used. And all your partner IDs should be here. If anyone has taken the survey using your partner ID. So this is one way to check. So I use something ADV. That's the one I used. Yeah. I'll use something that's here. ADV SGP1. I don't know. Oh, I need to refresh the data. That's why. By the way, this don't check instantly, because it might not be there instantly because of the volumes of data. We can only refresh it daily. So if you ask someone to take the survey and you don't see it instantly, don't worry, it's there. It will appear the next day. So I'm going to select ADV SGP1 because it has some data. I don't want to just go into my one. I'm going to SGP2, and which has 144 votes, and you can see see by which age group the vote has come from, gender. You can see which areas the votes have come from, and this is over a time period how you've got votes in the system. The next one is page 2, right here on top left-hand corner. When you click on it, it will tell you, once again, it will ask you to filter by a partner ID. So I'm going to filter by SGP2. And now I can do all sorts of analysis. I can immediately see quality education is the highest ranked among the visitors I brought into the site. And I can filter by country, I can filter by city. If I want, I used Bangkok, so it should be oh, not for this particular partner, but I'll use Singapore. Then you can see the priorities for people in Singapore in this visualization. So in a nutshell, and you can also go into all these other filters and create your own, do your own analysis. So in a nutshell, this is how you would use a partner ID, and this is how you can track how many visitors, how many users you have converted, meaning how many if you use a social media campaign, how many have watched your social media campaign and how many have come to the My World survey and taken the survey. Right, thank you very much, everyone. Once again, if you have questions, please feel free to use the chat channel to enter your questions, and we will answer them. And if you have very specific technical questions, please feel free to add them as well. They will be beneficial for others who are listening and viewing this YouTube video. So put them as well, and we will try to answer them all. And again, back to Laura to go into her presentation.
Okay, well, I think that actually, I mean, that's basically the end of the formal presentation, but we'd like to open it up for questions. There's one question I've seen from one of the participants, which is asking whether you need to collect responses both offline and online. It's absolutely up to you to decide which tool you think is most appropriate and going to serve your needs the best. So I think for most of you, online is going to be the easiest way to start. Probably the only way you might be using the offline is if you are organizing events. And it can be helpful at events, as I said, to capture a lot of different responses at the same time. But this will depend upon your campaign strategy. And as we said, your campaign, we'll have another conversation regarding campaign strategies next week. So you can think about, depending on your team and how you'd like to engage people, the two different options exist, and both are available and interesting, I think. Of course, it does take some resources for the paper ballots. You have to have access to printing. If you're going to do a large print run, that can be expensive. And there is also the rather labor-intensive process then of copying the votes over. So I can certainly understand if all of you just do the process primarily online. And after all, if you're engaging primarily youth, almost all of the youth you'll be trying to talk to are probably online. But as I said, if you do want to have a campaign that specifically tries to target people who are not online, you can look at paper or just interviewing people with your computer or your phone in your hand, where you can capture responses from a broader community. Basically, it's up to you. Do we have any other questions? I can't see the screen. Not so far. Okay. I wonder, in terms of how the data will be used, I don't think that I spoke that much. I talked about some ways the data have been used in the past, but perhaps I'll also update you a little bit on what we see coming forward with the data. Do we also want to give the floor to Nadine? Can we do that? If she's connected, if she wants to add anything?
Sure, we can send the link to connect.
Nadine, if you're listening, can you tell us if you'd be interested to add some comments in terms of how you can see the data being used at regional level? I'll talk about the global level first. And then,
yeah,
is she okay?
While we try to get to it.
Okay, great. So at the global level, we as the UNSCG Action Campaign are regularly holding exhibitions and events where we showcase the global level data. An example of this will be during the high-level political forum on SDGs happening in July, and then of course also during the General Assembly typically every year during those events and many others, we are presenting these results. And we try to have as direct an interaction with world leaders. What happens is if we have an exhibition, for instance, we have high-level delegations that come by the exhibition and we can walk them through the data on a touch screen. And then they usually will go straight to their own country to see how their country is voting with respect to, or compared to how the rest of the world is voting. And they usually also explore how different demographic groups respond to the data. So how are young women responding? How are more educated people responding, etc. And so these data will be presented there. Is Nadine going to connect as well?
We're trying to get.
Okay, great. And of course, given the ASEAN focus for this data capture, there will also be presentations at the various relevant ASEAN fora. I think there's an annual meeting, and this is what Nadine will talk about, the ASEAN annual forum meeting. I'm not sure what it's called, sorry. And so the data, in addition to you being able to create the data and analyze them for your own purposes as a campaign, we as a campaign here globally also take the data to all the different relevant fora. In addition, UNDP is very involved in this rollout, as you know, UNDP at the regional center in particular. And so they are also feeding the data to high-level partners within UNDP, high-level officials from UNDP to provide the data back to the government and to present it in every relevant forum. I mean, whether it's a forum on cities or on climate change, we bring the data back and make sure that these voices will be heard. I'm going to open the floor for questions again. Is there anything that's come through?
There's a question from Nen. He says, I do not understand what is Partner ID for. I was absent in the YouTube video last week on the 12th, so if you want to.
Okay, so the Partner ID is the way that we identify you within the results. So the results come to us online, and we are able to track who collected which responses. And there are two reasons that's important. One is so that you get credit for your work. We can see how many you've responded or you've sent through. And the other reason, of course, is it enables you to see which responses you've collected and therefore to also analyze the data that have come from your respondents. And Diane just demonstrated how you can see that in the global data page. That is the ASEAN-data.myworld2030.org. You see a drop-down list on the top right for Partner ID, and there you can find your own Partner ID and see which responses you've collected, how many, who's responded, and how they've responded.
Yeah, trying to see if Nadine is connected. Not yet. So, is there any? Are there any questions from on Partner IDs or how you want to visualize them?
We'll just give it a couple of minutes in case. No?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the opportunity to ask questions extends beyond the webinar, of course. We'll be tracking the comments associated with this video, and that's a very good place for you to post your questions, and we can provide the answers there, and then also provide the answers as we communicate with you in the future, for instance, in additional webinars, and then in some of our mailouts to you, if we see that a lot of people have questions. Oh, Nadine's here, fantastic. So Nadine, we'd like to give you the floor to talk about some of the different ways that the data will be used at the regional level.
Hi, let's see if it works. I don't know if you can hear me well.
Yes.
Great. So first of all, I'm here on behalf of UNDP Asia Pacific. I am the Youth and Civic Engagement focal point. I've been working with Yilton, Laura, and Henriette for the past few weeks, so now maybe a couple months now on this initiative, and we've been very excited. Another partner who's not here today is UNV Asia Pacific, and I think we were very happy to partner with the SDG Action Campaign, because I think there are numerous critical ways that the advocates can implement the survey at the national and the local level. I think maybe a few tips that I can think of from the top of my head that I think would be very useful for you all. So don't be too scared about the technical aspects of it. I think Diane explained it very easily. It is actually very user-friendly. And I know all of you have been selected also for your IT and your online skills. So we've seen your social media. So don't be put off by the technical aspect. It's actually super easy to use. It literally took me 5 minutes to figure this out, and there's page 2 and then how to filter the data. And don't hesitate to ask the team in Bonn and also in Bangkok. We're very happy to support you. The other thing I can think of maybe for the implementation in your community is think about engaging. It's not necessarily the number of votes you're getting. It's also the engagement around it. So think about talking to your family, your friends, to your students. If you're working with your co-workers, this is just a conversation. And specialty. For instance, for me, I'm specialized in SDG 10, 11, 16, and 17. So if you don't have to look, you have SDG to care about. So for specialties, inequalities. So that's the SDG that I think, and that's the way I can start a conversation. I don't know much about infrastructure, or I don't know much about education, but I know a lot about inequalities. So it's a way to show people that I'm passionate. It's a great way to start a conversation. Not everybody about all the SDGs. Remember, all the SDGs cover all of sustainable development. It's meant for 193 member states. So you're not expected to know everything about everything. And don't hesitate to share the resources, because while you are collecting votes under your partner ID, you can also encourage other people to join, maybe with their own partner ID. So whoever you know in your circles who wants to join, just get them to send an email to support@sdgactioncampaign.org, and they can join as well as individuals. They can register as individuals or as organizations, because a lot of you, and I know you have NGOs that you're working for, you have student associations. All those people can join either individually or as partners. Then maybe one last tip would be, think about being an advocate as an opportunity to learn skills. So yes, you are partnering with the UN. This is very nice and fancy, but you're learning very, very valuable skills that you'll be able to use when you're going to be working, be it in government, in NGO, private sector. What you're learning is organizing a campaign, basically mobilizing and communicating around you. You're learning how to, write up, like the Humans of My World. You're learning to do like a communication piece. So writing, speaking, communicating, all of these skills beyond this just 4 months are going to be very useful for all of you in your future careers. So I hope you also see it in that way, in terms not necessarily just votes or UN, but also think about skills. And the program has a big emphasis on skills. So please try to join all the webinars, because while they focus on My World and focus on the SDGs, those skills you can use way beyond these 4 months. And I think they will be very useful in your future career. That's it on my side.
Thanks,
Bye, everyone. Sure thing.
That's excellent. Hi, everybody. Laura again. Thank you so much, Nadine, for the inspiration and motivation and the advice as well. And I think that we'll close there. This is a continuing conversation. So, of course, if you get started with My World this weekend and you have questions, you can ask some of those questions in the next webinar as well. We're super excited to be working with all of you. I think that you should take this as closing remarks. Take this My World survey as a tool to help you to engage your community and to build your visibility as an advocate and also your credibility as an advocate. You're attached to the UN through this initiative, and when you gather voices from your community, you are speaking for more than just yourself. So we'll close there. Again, if you have questions, you can post them here or send them to us directly, or use the next webinar as your opportunity. Thanks, everybody, and we look forward to seeing your responses coming up live on the data page and to working with you throughout the period to help to make this happen. Bye-bye.